So let's compare our situation with theirs, and consider first of all whether the Spartan and Persian kings are of humbler descent. We know, of course, that the Spartan kings are descended from Heracles, and the Persian kings are descended from Achaemenes, and that the families of Heracles and Achaemenes go right back to Perseus, son of Zeus. Mine too, Socrates. My family goes back to Eurysaces, and Eurysaces goes back to Zeus. So does mine too, noble Alcibiades. Mine goes back to Daedalus, and Daedalus goes back to Hephaestus, son of Zeus. Starting with those kings, though, and tracing backwards, every one of them is a king, all the way back to Zeus. Kings of Argos, and Sparta, and kings of Persia in eternity, and sometimes of Asia, as they are now. But you and I are private citizens, as were our fathers. And if you had to show off your ancestors, and Salamis, the native land of Eurysaces, to Artaxerxes, son of Xerxes, or Aegina, the native land of Aeacus, the ancestor of Eurysaces, don't you realize how much you'd be laughed at? But you think we're the equal of those men in the dignity of our descent, as well as in our upbringing. Haven't you noticed what a commanding position the Spartan kings enjoy? Their wives are guarded at public expense by the Ephors, so as to ensure, as far as possible, that their kings are descended from the family of the Heraclidi. And as for the Persian king, his position is so supreme that nobody so much as suspects his heir of being fathered by anybody but him. That's why his queen is left unguarded except by fear. When the eldest son and heir to the throne is born, all the king's subjects have a feast day. Then, in the years that follow, the whole of Asia celebrates that day, the king's birthday, with further sacrifice and feasting. But when we are born, Alcibiades, even the neighbors hardly notice it, as the comic poet says. Then the boy is brought up, not by some nanny of no account, but by the most highly respected eunuchs in the royal household. They attend to all the needs of the infant child, and are especially concerned to make him as handsome as possible, shaping and straightening his infant limbs. And for this they are held in great esteem. When the boys reach 7 years of age, they take up horseback riding with their instructors, and begin to hunt wild game. When he is twice 7 years, the boy is entrusted to people called the royal tutors. These are 4 Persians of mature age, who have been selected as the best, the wisest, the justest, and most self-controlled, and the bravest. The first of them instructs him in the worship of their gods, the Magian lore of Zoroaster, son of Horomasses, and also in what a king should know. The justest man teaches him to be truthful his whole life long. The most self-controlled man teaches him not to be mastered by even a single pleasure, so that he can get accustomed to being a free man and a real king, whose first duty is to rule himself, not be a slave to himself. The bravest man trains him to be fearless and undaunted, because fear is slavery. But for you, Alcibiades, Pericles chose from among his household Zopyrus, the Thracian, a tutor so old he was perfectly useless. I could tell you all about the rest of the upbringing and education of your competitors, but it would be a long story, and besides, you can probably imagine the later stages from what I've told you so far. But, Alcibiades, your birth, your upbringing, and your education, or that of any other Athenian, is of no concern to anybody, to tell the truth. Nobody, that is, except perhaps some man who may happen to be in love with you. Again, if you care to consider the wealth of the Persians, the splendor, the clothes and trailing robes, the anointings with myrrh, the throng of servants in waiting, and all their other luxuries, you'd be ashamed of your circumstances, because you'd see how inferior they are to theirs. Again, if you care to consider the self-control and the decorum of the Spartans, their confidence and their composure, their self-esteem and their discipline, their courage and their fortitude, and their love of hardship, victory, and honor, you'd consider yourself a mere child in all these respects. Again, we'd better discuss your wealth, Alcibiades. If you were to see where you stand, you may devote yourself to it and think it makes you something. But if you care to look at the wealth of the Spartans, you'd realize that it greatly exceeds ours in Athens. They have land of their own in Messene that not a single one of our estates could compete with, not in size, nor in quality, nor in slaves, especially helots, nor even in horses, nor in the other livestock grazing in Messene. But I'll pass over all of that. There is more gold and silver in Sparta in private hands than in the rest of Greece put together. It's been coming into them for many generations, pouring in from all of Greece's cities, and often from foreign cities too, and it never goes out again. It's just like what the fox says to the lion in Aesop's fable. You can clearly see the tracks of the money going in towards Sparta, but the tracks coming out are nowhere to be seen. So you can be sure that the Spartans are the richest of the Greeks in gold and silver, and that the king is the richest of all the Spartans, because the greatest share of these revenues goes to him. Furthermore, he receives a considerable sum from the Spartans by way of royal tribute. But great as they are when compared with other Greek cities, the Spartan fortunes are nothing compared with the fortunes of the Persians and their king. I once spoke with a reliable man who traveled over to the Persian court, and he told me that he crossed a very large and rich tract of land, nearly a day's journey across, which the locals called the Queen's Girdle. There's another one called the Queen's Veil, as well as many others, all fine and rich properties, each one named for a part of the Queen's wardrobe, because each one is set aside to pay for the Queen's finery. Now suppose someone were to say to Amistris, the king's mother and the widow of Xerxes, "The son of Dynameche intends to challenge your son. Her wardrobe is worth only 50 minas at best, and her son has less than 300 acres of land at Archaea." I think she'd be wondering what this Alcibiades had up his sleeve to think of competing against Artaxerxes. I think she'd say, "I don't see what this fellow could be relying on, except diligence and wisdom. The Greeks don't have anything else worth mentioning." But if she heard that this Alcibiades who is making this attempt is, in the first place, hardly 20 years old yet, and secondly, entirely uneducated, and furthermore, when his lover tells him to study and cultivate himself, discipline himself, so that he can compete with the king, he says he doesn't want to, and that he's happy with the way he is. If she heard all that, I think she'd ask in amazement, what in the world could this youngster be relying on? Suppose we were to reply, good looks, height, birth, wealth, and native intelligence. Then, Alcibiades, considering all that they have of these things as well, she'd conclude that we're starved raving mad. Again, I think that Lampedo, the daughter of Leotychidus, wife of Archidamus, and mother of Agis, who were all Spartan kings, would be similarly amazed if you, with your bad upbringing, proposed to compete with her son, considering all his advantages. And yet, don't you think it's disgraceful that even our enemies' wives have a better appreciation than we do of what it would take to challenge them? No, my excellent friend, trust in me and in the Delphic inscription, and know thyself. These are the people we must defeat, not the ones you think, and we have no hope of defeating them unless we act with both diligence and skill. If you fall short of these, then you will fall short of achieving fame in Greece as well as abroad. that is what I think you're longing for, more than anyone else ever longed for anything.